Hey everybody, ronarray here, and as you know melee was hugely buffed in 3.25. Together with melee, GGG changed Gladiator Ascendancy, making it the best defensive option that we currently have with insane 87% of block chance that are pretty easy to achieve. On top of that, they also changed bleed related nodes, adding Aggravated and raised damage for explosion node from 10% to 20%, making bleed explosions even more juiced. So now Bleed Gladiator will be a pretty strong league starting option. So here's my step-by-step league starter guide for Lacerate of Haemorrhage Gladiator. In the video I'm going to cover all steps of progression and will share tips and insights for bleed related builds. Use the timestamp for easier navigation and let's go. So the first question is why Lacerate of Haemorrhage? Well, the clear of the build is heavily carried by the Bleed Explosion node, which is currently buffed. Therefore, the main issue is single target damage, which is great with Lacerate double slash. And another reason is the buff itself. Lacerate received a huge damage effectiveness bonus from 120% to 346, which is going to help with scaling significantly, especially closer to endgame. GGG also changed Perfect Agony node, opening the door to a possibility of cool crit bleed builds, which I definitely like. So, very important questions that we need to discuss about bleed is pretty much what is bleed roll and bleed fission. So, here's my endgame version of Lacerate of Haemorrhage. It has physical from 6k to 84k, which is a huge difference because it's mostly using volatility support. So when you are hitting an enemy, the enemy receives one bleed stack if you're not using Crimson Dance based on the physical damage that rolled. For example, if you will roll 6k, it will receive bleed based on 6k, and if you will roll like 84k, it will receive bleed based on 84k. So the difference in amount of bleed damage that enemy will receive could be huge based on that roll. So in Path of Building there is a stat called average bleed roll. It's pretty much a number that will be showcasing the average amount of damage that enemy is going to receive if you're constantly attacking that enemy. So even if the enemy can have only one stack of bleed on itself, you still need to attack it constantly to make sure that at all time you have as high bleed as possible on that particular enemy. And it should help tremendously for bleed duration and bleed DPS itself. That process when you're just attacking enemy consistently to make sure that the bleed rolled as high damage as possible called bleed fission, because you're attacking enemy and fishing for higher rolls. And that's a pretty important part. So even if you are going to play Aggravated and you will have only one bleed stack, you will still need to attack enemy constantly because that's going to increase your DPS. So another expected question is, which is better, Aggravated or Crimson Dance? Both of them are good, but the requirements for Crimson Dance are much higher right now. When you calculate damage in POB, it always takes all 8 stacks from Crimson Dance with max damage. But I already explained in the previous question that bleed damage could be very random, so realistically, applying 8 stacks with maximum damage will be pretty hard. Even if you can apply 8 stacks, you will need to ensure that all of them roll with high damage, which could require a lot of hits and a lot of attack speed as well. And well, if half of bleeds will roll with bad damage, the whole DPS will suffer significantly. Because of that reason, I strongly recommend to go with Aggravated instead, and just fish for best bleed damage for your one stack, until you will get a very good gear with very high amount of attack speed and you will be able to try something else such as Crimson Dance. After that, let's figure out the best source for Aggravated. Is Jagged technique even good? Well, that's a tricky question. Generally, Jagged technique is a great node, especially in the early and middle game, because of the consistency it can provide. We can still try to get Aggravated without it, with Bleed Mastery for example, but the Mastery will require longer bleeds and will add the ramp up time. Or with crit passives, but crit passives are purely endgame thing, since they will synergize properly only with Perfect Agony, and we will need a lot of crit for Perfect Agony. Or Bloodletting passive for example. But Bloodletting passive gives us only 10%, which is simply not enough without crazy attack speed. All that leaves us with Jagged technique, which is easy to get, very consistent, and should work just perfectly, so I really recommend to roll with it. Another question would be, which bleed duration is the best? So currently I don't think there's such thing as best bleed duration. It heavily depends on your build and your stats at the moment. However, most of the time I would recommend to go for something like 4 seconds, which is not too high and not too low, and will be approximately alright. If you will go a little lower and will go 3, it will be fine, and if you will go 5, it will be fine as well. However, most of the time when I'm building myself, I aim for something closer to 4. So another question is how we are getting our block. Since Versatile Combatant being changed, we can receive only minus 10% of maximum chance to block attack damage and block spell damage if we are using it. That way, we're pretty much receiving 65% of block chance and spell block chance. And it's pretty easy to get, because we're getting Determined Survivor, which is going to provide 50% chance to block just by itself. And it's so easy to pick more block on the tree because we have so many block nodes around. After we received 65 for both spell block chance and normal block chance, we're going to use More Than Skill. More Than Skill is going to add an option which will make our chance to block attack or spell damage is lucky if you blocked recently. So if you blocked at least one recently, we are going to receive that lucky bonus. Lucky bonus is going to rise our chance from 65 to 87% because it's going to roll twice and it's pretty much rising the chance for us to block again. It works the same way, for example, as Spell Suppression, which is going to rise you from 65 to 87% with a lucky chance too. You can check it on Path of Building if you're interested in the process. So one very important thing to keep in mind, since it's pretty much an attacking build, even if you're based on bleed, you still need to rise your physical damage to pretty much ensure that your bleed will be applied from as high physical damage as possible. That way you will need to constantly change weapons. Try to pick all the weapons from the ground and mostly look for access. You will need access with physical damage, attack speed or bleed bonuses. All of those bonuses are very important because you will need to constantly upgrade the weapons, otherwise your damage while leveling will feel not good and you will fall behind. So don't forget about that and always check all the weapons around. So another pretty important question is how to manage mana while leveling. At the start, mana flows for 30% increased mana regeneration should be just enough. However, while progressing, I recommend to use a Clarity, at least a low level Clarity, to pretty much receive some mana regeneration. That way, Clarity level 3 or 4 would be a pretty decent option. If it's still not enough for you, you can go for Spirit of War. It will require only 3 passives, so just look into it. And it will give you some physical attack damage leached as mana together with reduced mana cost of attacks, and it should be perfectly enough. However, in the highest levels of the build, we're going for life and mana leech. So if you will wait for at least like level 50 or 60, it's definitely going to be in the build itself. If early you will feel like you need more mana, go for Spirit of War. If not, just wait and you will be able to go for life and mana leech a little later on. And just keep with Clarity because in my opinion it would be enough. So let's go to level it. I will show basic rewards at the start of your leveling campaign, but later on just look into gems into Path of Building and that way you will be able to understand which one you will need to buy. So your first pick is Splitting Steel, because we are going to play with Splitting Steel at least until you will be able to get normal Lacerate. Playing melee skill is also about the weapons, so if you can take 200x early, it would be a nice help, because with Splitting Steel it's going to work much better. At level 4 you also will be able to buy a Frostblink. I definitely recommend Frostblink for leveling because it's a very cool skill. You will need a little more intelligence to pretty much use it, however I still recommend to just buy it. And pretty much keep it. It will cost only 1 scroll of wisdom, so it's definitely a great idea. Next support that you will be able to use with Splitting Steel is pretty much Chance to Poison, so take that, and if you'll have a 3-link, don't hesitate to use it. As the next reward, you can just take Maim support because you will be able to use Maim with Lacerate later. So next reward before the Merveil, and it's pretty much Lacerate itself. So well, just take the skill. So another skill that we need to take is pretty much a lip slam at that moment, because lip slam is going to help us tremendously with just moving around. If you have enough currency, you can also go to Nessa and pretty much just buy Vitality or Clarity based on your current situation, because both mana and life is pretty much required at that moment, so any kind of regeneration is good. If you have Orb of Transmutation, you can go and buy it. If you don't have them, just ignore it. So right before Brutus, it would be perfect if you will go and level up a level 9, because with that you will be able to get mana flows, which give you intelligence and mana regeneration. It's going to help you at the Brutus because it will be much easier for you to attack him. If you can get Iron Ring, just basic one for example, it would help you as well. And just splitting steel, chance to poison and chance to bleed is pretty much enough for the fight. So what you need to set up before the Merveil fight? I recommend if you found the currency or just found the rings themselves, use the Sapphire rings. Even if you rolled a bad one for like 20% of cold resistance, it's still going to help you tremendously. So yeah, I have 20 and 29 here. As a skill, you still will be able to use Lacerate together with chance to bleed and chance to poison. If you will have another red socket, you will be able to get main support. However, I for example don't have a red socket, so I'm going to use chance to poison support again. And if you have a slot for an aura, I just recommend to use Vitality, because you will probably not have enough for Clarity too. And as a weapon, you can use two-handed sword or double swords at the moment. So after getting basic rewards, you will need to pretty much rely on path of building. In path of building, I have a proper showcasing for each moment. So for example, level 9 Brutus showcasing user 3, you will be able to see basic items too together with skills like 1 to level 12 Splitting Steel and from level 12 Lacerate Setup. Just make sure to change all the 3 simultaneously. So if for example you're choosing level 32 swap to X, you will just need to pick it everywhere, so in skill set, in items, and on the 3 as well. So at level 32, you will need to properly swap to X, so to a particular X. You will be able to use it together with a shield because it can provide a pretty decent result. That way, you can read names of an items, and I usually have tips in those names. So look, for example, for weapon, pick any axe with Fizz, Bleed, and attack speed. So just Fizz or Bleed will be pretty much enough for that case. So for every item I have a tip here. Just open Path of Building, choose your level and check the tips. It pretty much goes the same with the skills. I have proper names for them. For example, that one is movement skill, curse self effect here, for example, damage auras or defensive auras. It should give you a proper image on what you need to do. So progressing further, you will have a first Ascendancy at 32 as well, and it's going to be Gracious Violence. So just pick it, it's going to help you tremendously with the Cleric. After that, you will need to fix your resistances at level 36, because at level 36 you're going to encounter the Rescent Column, and it's going to apply some pressure for your resistances. So you will just need to get resistances here, so here and here, and pretty much if it's possible go for Barbarism too, because it's going to give you at least some fire resistance. So I don't have a properly picked items for almost any level lower than Watchstones, for example. I just give you tips because your items are going to be from the ground anyway. So I just have tips here what you will need to pick. So pick any armor with life, for example. And that's pretty much what I even have on Path of Building. That way you will need to think about what kind of items you need at the moment. So progressing further, your second Ascendancy will be at level 54. I also have changing supports here and skills, so please keep it in mind. For example, if we have Brutality at level 54, because it's kind of available from 44, for example, we don't have it at level 36, so just look into the supports when I'm changing them in Path of Building, and it's going to help you with DPS as well. So at level 54, you're going to have your next Ascendancy. and it should be Aggravated, because Jagged technique together with Aggravated are going to help you tremendously with the damage. I also recommend to go for Life and Mana Leech finally, because it's going to help you tremendously with the mana. And you will need to go to the last part as soon as possible too, and get at least Vanquisher and Physical Mastery. That way it will be easier to roll for higher bleeds, and that's pretty much what bleed builds should do. While progressing further, you will have third Ascendancy at level 66. And at level 66 you also should cap block. As you can see, my block chance is capped right here, just because you will need to pick enough block nodes for it. So capping block will require you to get Tetsudo, because it will provide you a lot of chance to block attack damage. It will require you to get Versatile Combatant, because that way you will be able to cap your spell block chance. And on top of that, you will also need to take one block node, little one here. If it still will not be enough for some reason, you can take one small node again, so two small nodes. But usually only one should be enough. So without it, as you can see, we have only 60% of spell block chance here. But if we have that node, we will have 65% perfectly. I just have a basic shield here without any additional block chance, and I heavily rely on Determined Survivor to pretty much get the block chance up. We will also be able to get rid of that little node after we will get Last Ascendancy, because it's going to provide us with 3% of chance to block attack damage, and it will be pretty much enough at the moment. So that's pretty much how we are capping block. Just make sure that you at least have 65% of block chance for attacks and 60% for spells. So the next part is pretty much early map setup. It's going to level at least like around level 70 to 75. And I have a perfect setup right here with already set up items, so it's pretty important. Right now I just have items with the stats that you will need on them. Still read my comments please on every item, I have it there. However, you can look at the stats as well. You can also get some earlier good items too, because it's going to help you tremendously with pretty much your resistances and stuff like that. However, if you can get some resistances on items, don't worry, you will be able to just exchange it from time to time. And just pick different of them. So most of those are pretty much recommendations, and you shouldn't follow them too closely. On top of that, you will also be able to get some suppression together with end range. However, capping it will require some time, so when you're joining maps, you will just have block chance, capped, and a little spell suppression here and there. That pretty much should be enough for almost all big issues. I also recommend to use Jack the Axe, if you can get Jack the Axe. However, if you will be unable to get that for level 65, just use a proper physical related axe that could be pretty close in terms of damage. And all other items you can just check and path of building too. The most important part for early maps itself is pretty much capping your resistances, and together with capped block chance, it's going to help you tremendously to just survive. And if you're surviving well, you're pretty much clearing, because your clear will be boosted by Gracious Violence. And if you will need to fight a boss a little longer, that's like perfectly alright. After your early map progression is pretty much done, your next step is Watchstones. Just change all parts here for Watchstones, you will be able to see what you will need to have at Watchstones. So at Watchstones you will have spell suppression capped. It's a pretty important part, and I recommend to just get Inveterate for it, because Inveterate can provide you with 15% of chance to suppress spell damage. However, that's a pretty important question. You will ask me, Ron, what if I don't have a golden oil? Well, that's too bad, so it will mean that you will need to take Courage instead. So it's pretty important. If you can get Inveterate, just go here and take Courage with 3 points. It could help you tremendously. To get Courage, you will need to do those 3 points, like Endurance Charge and Jewel, because that way you will be able to get 3 points here for Courage. So if you're not capped or don't have Inveterate option, just go for Courage, because it's going to help you tremendously again. And next question is where you're getting 6% more. I recommend to just get Suppress on your shield. So try to get any shield with additional physical, armor, or life. And on top of that, just craft chance to suppress spell damage on that shield. You don't need anything else in there. So if you will get something like that, do that. And 6% is going to help you. It's also pretty important to get Prevention here, because it helps you against spell damage, and spells are pretty much making it much worse. Another question is pretty much Fortify. We're getting Fortify from melee hits, Fortify Mastery. And Steadfast is going to help us with regeneration. That's a lot of regeneration, to be honest, for an early build. And with maximum fortification as well. So try to get 2 maximum here and 3 maximum here. Next question is where we are getting endurance charges. So I have endurance charges clicked in my setup, and that's pretty important, because for endurance charges, we will have 2 techniques how we can get them. First is Aggressive Bastion. It gives us 10% chance to get endurance charge on kill while holding a shield. But I think that for hard encounters, for the bosses, or any bad situations, it's not enough, because you will not have them consistently enough. So we have a second technique to get it. It's pretty much inexorable. That way we can get 25% chance to get an endurance charge when we are hit. So important note right here. If we are hit and we are blocking the hit, like the hit comes for a block, we are still considered like we are hit. So we are still can receive endurance charge. That's a pretty important thing, because we are blocking very often. So inexorable, in my opinion, is just like absolutely mandatory to pretty much feel good and always have endurance charges. Endurance charges is going to help us tremendously with defenses, so try to get it. Another important question for survivability is pretty much what else we can do to survive a little better. I recommend to take 30% reduced extra damage from critical strikes. It's going to help you in game. It's not really providing a lot of numbers in path of building, but well, it's helping you in game. And you will not die from extra crits at the moment, especially against bigger hits. Because well, we don't have a lot of health, and we could be kind of vulnerable to big hits, especially if it's not a spell and we can't suppress it. So another thing is pretty much taking maximum elemental resistances bonuses here, and for example here at Nomadic Techniques too. It should help as well. So try to get all of them together. And another important question is how to calculate our DPS. To calculate our DPS, I have approximate modifier and custom modifiers. I got that modifier based on changing skill numbers in pretty much Lua file for path of building. That way you can just calculate your damage after the change in the skill. You will be able to delete numbers and pretty much come up with the stuff that will work. So important part, after the path of building will update, you will need to delete the custom modifier, because the skill will be updated and we will not have too much damage. It could cause a little confusion. However, before the update, I'm going to have the modifier here. Keep it in mind and just get rid of it after path of building will be updated. I'm probably going to update path of building link in the builds too. However, if you are going to save it, you will pretty much need it to do it manually. Another important part is Pride Aura effect, which should be maximum. Try to stay closer to enemy. If you're not really receiving a lot from Crushed, but to see your proper damage, you will need to click Is Enemy Moving right here, because we have Aggravated, and it's literally almost tripling our damage. It's a pretty important part. So Watchstone build by itself should be pretty good enough to progress. However, here's 96 level version for a later map. It's mostly here to just provide you with a 3, because I don't see a lot of point to update the build for endgame items, because it's pretty much will come with endgame version, but I will be able to properly test it. So just keep upgrading your items based on my comments. There's comment for every item right here, and consider it just like a very good recommendation. And it pretty much comes with a skill too.
We also will be able to change to 6 link at 96 because I have Watchstones at 5 link. And Lacerate of Haemorragge should be exchanged at pretty much level 91 at that point. It should help a lot. Just with basic damage, but if you just have a basic Lacerate, that's alright. The damage of basic Lacerate will be enough to pretty much carry you through the Watchstone. So for level 96 I just have a 6 link with one addition here. And to discuss that addition, a lot of people will ask me why it's Chance to Bleed. So it's Chance to Bleed just mostly because we don't have Awakened Gems at the moment. And we have Deadly Ailments, Swift Affliction and Chance to Bleed. Percentage damage between them is not that high. So I think Chance to Bleed will provide less mana costs than Swift Affliction, for example, which provides 7 as you can see on my screen, or Deadly Ailments, which provides 7 as well. So I think Chance to Bleed is a pretty decent option, because it just provides 3 and amount of damage it gives is pretty much not that different from Swift Affliction, for example. It will be like less than 4%. So don't worry about it, you can use Chance to Bleed. And if you don't have it or you want to use something stronger just based on POB calculation, you could just go for Deadly Ailments, because it's going to provide you with best numbers, even if it will be a little clunky to use because of less damage from hits. Yeah, I prefer to use Chance to Bleed here, as you can see. There's also a different approach to auras. I'm not using any enlightens. And another important part to see is pretty much Molten Shell. I don't have it clicked, because I think for starters it could be decent. Sometimes I'm leaving it clicked, sometimes not. And I think the build can provide a pretty decent numbers even without it. However, you can click it to see better numbers in terms of survivability when you have it. But uptime will be not that high even with increased duration. So another important part for late game setup or early setup or setups overall is pretty much Calend's Strike at the Lip Slam. Calend's Strike itself is a pretty helpful thing. And since Lip Slam is doing damage, and Lip Slam is doing damage, you can just jump to an enemy and Calend's Strike it with the jump itself. So just use that technique, it could help you to finish your enemies faster. Another important part is a banner. Banner will kinda changed, and right now I don't have it clicked in Pathway Building, because it will be changed in Pathway Building and in game itself too. I still recommend to use it, so carry it with you and pretty much try to place it every time. You can also move it here to cast and damage taken part just for banner to get increased duration bonuses. It could be pretty nice, but it's definitely not necessary. Another important part is Frostblink. So I think Frostblink is pretty much necessary to move smoothly in almost all the cases, just because Frostblink is instant. It's pretty much helps it enough to use it in almost all setups, just to instantly change your location and position. Because when you're using Lip Slam, you will need to jump manually, so you're literally flying from point A to point B. It's not good. Frostblink should be mandatory to dodge stuff, especially at Watchstones or late maps, so don't forget to use that. So that was my Bleed Lacerate Gladiator guide. It should pretty much cover all your needs and every step of progression, and you should feel just fine playing it. But I'm going to play it on stream probably. I already have a choice out of 2 builds, and Lacerate is one of them. So if you're interested to see that leave, feel free to check my Twitch, I have a link down there in the description. So thank you very much for watching, subscribe for more RPG content, and see you next time. Hope you'll have an amazing league start.